Hey y'all, it's your legal bestie, attorney Symone Redwine. I am here, and this is like not regularly scheduled programming, right? Because I actually had like Drea and her mess on the docket for today. But I started to see clips from NABJ. NABJ stands for the National Association of Black Journalists. They had their convention today. And Trump, much like many other presidents, former presidents in the past, or presidential candidates, spoke before the body. He spoke at he came to the convention and sat down for a Q&A. And the clips I saw were unhinged. So come on in, tune on in. We're going to see what Trump is lying about today. So I'm going to cue this up. And for anyone who, I don't know, lives in a hole, just to let you know, this organization was started many moons ago because of the fact that Black journalists were not invited to question or participate in the press in the same way that the white ones were. So this is a really necessary entity. And I'll say, I was shocked. I was shocked that Trump chose to sit down with them. But apparently, many have rumored that the reason he chose to do this was not for us, but it was so that he could look at his Caucasian constituents so that they would feel like, look, he tried to, welcome everyone. It's just the colors they just don't like us, they just don't want to participate. So let me go ahead and cue this up. So as I said, we can see what Trump is lying about today. Another day, another set of lies. Here we go. All right, and I did speed this up to 1.25 speed, and we're also going to be fact checking it. I also have some of the fact checking on X. Let me see, make sure. On X, there was live fact checking that went on. Oh shoot, let's see if it'll let me. There we go. Live fact checking that went on during the course of this, because I like I said, I was listening to some clips and he is just making stuff up. Miss Aware says, loving your podcast. Thanks so much, guys. Can you hit that like button? By hitting that like button, it's a free way to support the channel, but it also cues to Instagram. I'm sorry, not Instagram, YouTube, to encourage other people to watch as well by recommending this video. All right, Angelic Sparkle says, just found your channel. Looking forward to this. Great. Thanks so much for joining us. Hey, Tracy. Yes, we're gonna, I'm gonna go ahead and get this started. Where we're gonna talk about some of the lies as they continue. So let's see if I can make this. Excellent. Now, here we go.
Here we go. Test. Good afternoon, NABJ, and welcome to a conversation with former President Donald Trump. This discussion continues a decades-long tradition during election years of inviting journalists to discuss the policies and their impact with the candidates who are running for president, and the impact of those policies, especially in Black communities. Former Presidents George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton have attended the NABJ conventions either as presidents or as presidential candidates in past years. NABJ is currently in conversation with Vice President Kamala Harris's team to schedule a Q&A either in person or virtually in September.
Better.
As journalists, we use—
Good. Now that makes sense. You see, many people were upset about the fact that they felt that NABJ didn't, number one, they didn't invite Black males journalists such as Roland Martin to participate in this conversation. Well, we all know Trump be running scary, so he wasn't going to allow that to happen. No hard hitters. In fact, as you'll see, one of the three ladies who are asking him questions is that good old colored girl from Fox News, pretty little colored thing. I don't even remember her name because she's a non-factor. But you'll see that you'll see how he handles that. Like I said, I watched a few clips, but we're going to watch this in the entirety, and I have it at 1.5 speed. Hey, Amy Daniel, good to see you.
Use opportunities like these, both to inform our reporting, but also to help voters understand the choices that they face in a consequential and historic election year. NABJ has partnered with PolitiFact to fact check this conversation in real time. You can access that feed on social media using the hashtag NABJFactCheck. Again, the hashtag is NABJFactCheck. We have a lot to get to, and we do not want to waste any time, so let's bring out the former president of the United States, the Republican nominee for president, former President Donald Trump. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing
I'm about to
the
pour a
elephant in
drink,
the room,
y'all.
sir.
This is gonna
A
get
lot of
me
people
upset.
did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today.
Mm-mm.
You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told four
Liar.
congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe Black district attorneys. You've attacked Black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist.
He did that
You've
to
had
Angel
dinner with
Ryan.
the white supremacists at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking Black supporters to vote for you, why should Black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible.
You didn't even say, hello, how are you? Clearly, they probably met backstage, and backstage had the boy.
That way. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the Black population of this country. I've done so much for the Black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for Black workers and Black entrepreneurs. I've done so much. And, you know, and I say this, historically Black colleges.
Y'all, opportunity zones basically are where the government is encouraging other businesses to come and open businesses in brown neighborhoods and Black neighborhoods that have fewer resources to increase the tax base. He didn't start that. That was started long before him. And in fact, he made it much harder to get monies in those areas to those areas because he felt like it was unfair to the rural class.
And universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke. And I saved them and I gave them long-term financing and nobody else was doing it. I think
he's saying he saved the HBCU.
It's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, you know, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late, just so we understand. I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working or something was
President,
wrong.
I would love
think
you
it's
can
a
answer
very
the
nasty
on your
question.
And why
I have answered the question. I have been the best president for the Black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act.
For you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace.
Let me just ask a follow-up, sir. And then
basically, he just called her raggedy to her face. He said, girl, you raggedy. I shouldn't even came over here. Y'all, I don't need a beverage for this. I shouldn't even came over here. And I'm sick of you, colored girl. That's basically what he's saying. We might need to have a panel at the end of this. I'm about to drop a link if y'all got something to say.
We'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition.
Sir, I'm asking you a question, a very direct question.
Define it for me if you
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of.
I mean, that is like one of the most bold-faced lies. First of all, I didn't know she was half Indian. I had no idea she was half Indian until more recently. The woman went to a HBCU and pledged the first Black sorority ever. If that ain't the blackest thing I've ever seen. I mean, he don't even try to create or make up believable lies at this point. He just lying for the sake of lying. He reminds me of one of my exes.
Years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
She has always identified as a Black woman.
I respect either one. I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden.
Her father is Jamaican. Okay. There's no question about her blackness to anyone but him. And he's not even questioning it. Now he's just making things up. But the fact that the president of the United States doesn't even know what DEI means, however, the Supreme Court picks he nominated have single-handedly destroyed their ability, DEI initiatives' ability to even exist in America. Just speaks to how disgusting he is. He knows exactly what diversity, equity, and inclusion means because he doesn't believe in any of them.
Sudden, she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do
And
you
I
believe
think,
that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I
Republicans
really
have
don't
said?
know. I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length, and we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that.
Well, you told me it was the longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look, I want to talk about why you're here today. I mean, it is not lost on us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really got to see that we are divided along the lines of race, along the lines of gender. And there is this question of, in this moment where we
Harris?
are,
That's the
why
whitest
come
thing
here?
I've seen
What
in
is
a
your
minute.
message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country that are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in this room I know and I have great respect for, a lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
And they're taking the employment away from black people. They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of
Baby, they're not
millions of
taking my
people, probably
job.
15, 16,
Let me tell you
17
something.
million people. I have a
They are not taking my job. I'm an attorney. They're not taking the job of my homegirls who are social workers, who are school teachers, who are absolutely not. You know, the jobs they are taking are the ones that are deadly. Okay, the ones where you're working in the fields, you're working with chemicals. Another thing they frequently come to do is in the middle of America, they work at these meat factories and these chicken processing factories that are dirty and nasty and disgusting that no one else wants to do because it is back-breaking labor. So I really want to know who has felt like, oh, there was a job that I wanted and I got passed over by an immigrant. That is just the most disingenuous thing, because the truth of the matter is the job you probably got passed over, you were passed over for by someone who didn't qualify for their for their job due to their mediocrity, but knew the boss. Perhaps their dads played golf together. I mean, that's much of how Trump got where he was. But I have never in my life wanted any opportunity that was taken by someone who came over here unlawfully to work. Like, not ever.
feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar. She's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs. And frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected by all of the millions of people that are pouring into our country. And one thing, as we discussed, many of these people are coming in from mental institutions, from prisons, from jails. They're gang members in other countries. Other countries are setting loose their prisoners. They're opening up their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're taking their bad people, drug dealers, gang members, and they're bringing them into the United States. And by the way, their crime rate is going down, and our crime rate is going to be
So that's a lie. In fact, instead, what the Obama administration began doing is you'll start noticing that once people, if you were found to have committed a crime, you then get deported at the end of serving your jail sentence. You absolutely positively get deported. In fact, fun fact, I used to live in Dominican Republic. I lived there for a few months. And one of the things that I realized is frequently the taxi drivers, I'd have taxi drivers that spoke perfect English. So I started getting nosy. Come to find out, kid you not, if you ever go to DR, you're in Santo Domingo, Punta Cana, whatever, and you get a taxi driver that speaks perfect English with an American accent or twang to him, I guarantee you he was a criminal. what it was. Every single time I had that, it was actually someone who came over to America, committed some crime, served their time, and then got deported. That's why their English was so perfect. I'm talking, I had one guy who lived in America for 24 years. He just never finalized his paperwork because it wasn't a priority to him. Then he got caught. I think it was like selling drugs or something. He wouldn't tell me all of it. I didn't want to know, because if it was something dangerous, I was about to hop up out that taxi. But the truth is, at not disproportionate numbers, but at large numbers, they're actually getting deported. And other countries are not loading up caravans of criminals and shipping them over here. In fact, to the extent that they're like, oh, they're bringing drugs, and drugs come from the cartels. Like, I feel like I'm speaking to the choir here, but just wanted to make sure. I also wanted to share this. I want to share these facts with you that I've been researching. And the fact check truth about immigration is there was a 4-year study focused on immigrants' contributions to the labor market and economic growth and public financing in 10 developing and middle income countries. They found that immigrants are estimated contribution to the GDP averaged out at about 7%, ranging from about 1% in Ghana, 19% in other countries. But I'm going to see if I can find this stat again. But also, it's been found that immigrants disproportionately actually pay more taxes. When I say specifically illegal immigrants, here's the breakdown that I found really fascinating, but also made sense. They were saying some of the ways that immigrants disproportionately pay more taxes than even regular people is because they're working here. In order to work here, you have to have a social security number. What they do is they work here under fraudulent social security numbers. So they're actually paying into the tax system, but they don't file taxes, so they don't get the tax breaks, all of this. So they pay more taxes than some of our corporations here in America. And that is the truth. All right, let's keep going.
Disaster.
Mr. President, I want to get into how you address some of the issues with Black communities. And I say that plural because we live in communities of color that are different. We're not all the same. We don't vote the same. We don't think the same.
Sure.
It's not monolithic. So as you come here today, I want to talk about something that bursts. And this is the weight of the inflation on this country right now. The nonprofit Money Management International recently released data from its mid-year analysis that we have found a 52% rise in people who are seeking counseling for being in credit debt. They're paying for food that is sky high on their credit cards, and now they can't pay that off. The credit counseling nonprofit MMI, as I said, is saying now that they've seen surges that they haven't seen since we were in a pandemic of people in financial trouble. Much of that falls on the shoulders of single moms, single Black moms, when you look statistically. Yeah. How do you turn it around? What's your plan for the Black community when it comes to money?
So first of all, it's very hard to hear you for whatever reason because of the fact that they have bad equipment, because I guess, this woman was unable to get the right equipment. But it's very hard for me to hear you, but I can hear every other word. It's very difficult, actually. But so I don't know if they can fix it or do something with it, but I'll do the best I can with it. The inflation is absolutely destroying our middle class, our working class, virtually every class. Inflation is a disaster in our country. Inflation is a country buster. It breaks every country. And we had, in my opinion, the worst inflation we've had. They say it's 58 years, but I think it's much more than that. It's been devastating.
Part of the reason for the inflation is that these corporations under his watch received so many tax breaks, but never increased wages. See, the Republican philosophy is that you give the money to corporations and it trickles down, in effect. Just like under Reagan, they used to call it the trickle down theory. They still implement it. They just don't use the terminology anymore because now we're hip to it and we know it doesn't work. We know it is stupid. In reality, minimum wage, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25. Why? Because in every single time it has come up to vote, the Republican administrations have blocked it. So if you look up Trump's plan, he speaks nothing to the increase of minimum wage. In fact, their philosophy is that increasing minimum wage loses jobs. That's not true. Increasing minimum wage, it actually helps companies fine-tune what are the skills they actually want to pay people to perform. Here's a perfect example. Grocery stores. Growing up, you remember, you used to have baggers at the grocery store. The cashier would ring you up and someone else would bag them. We don't have baggers anymore. Some grocery stores, they'll do both, like at Trader Joe's, they ring you up and they bag you, and others, like Aldi, They're like, no, we bring you up, you on your own, because they found that it wasn't worth it to pay people to do that task. Those tasks then become automated, or they, allow the consumer to do it. So that's how that component works. Hold on. I want to share with you as well how we just talked about a fact check about immigration. I found the stat, y'all. Here we go. It says, in general, undocumented immigrants, here we go, pay an estimated $11.6 billion a year in taxes, according to the Institute on Tax and Economy. Immigrants are also less likely to take public benefits than native-born people, and illegal immigrants don't take any public benefits because they're actually scared of the system. So they're scared of getting, filling out any paperwork that's government oriented, blah, 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 blah. About half, and they tend to become more educated. It says out of half of all U.S. born Americans with no high school diploma work, compared to about 70% of immigrants with the same education level. It says less educated immigrants tend to work more than people with the same level of education, and therefore they contribute more to taxes. There we go. We're going back to the line. Here we go.
And if you just take a look at a lot of things they don't include, like interest rates. Interest rates went from 2.4% to 10%, and you can't get the money. People can't buy houses. They no longer have the American dream. Young people, young black people, they don't have the American dream anymore. They can't buy a house. They can't borrow the money because of the cost of the money. They can't buy it because of the cost of housing, because of the cost to build it, because of inflation. Inflation is a disaster, and it's destroying our country, and it's destroying the black community probably as much or
So what do
more
you do?
than any.
What's your plan?
You know what we have to do? We have to bring down the cost of energy, and that's going to bring down the cost of inflation. This was all started with a bad energy policy by Joe Biden. By the way, just if I might,
So he wants to bring down the cost of energy, but the problem with part of the way to do that is finding alternative energy sources, right? Because it increases the supply of energy. When there's more energy options, then what you have costs less. Mind you, I live in Houston, where right now, because of all the power outages from the hurricanes, CenterPoint is planning to hike up our rates so that we, the victims, have to pay them so that they don't have to take a loss. Take a freaking loss. So you out here helping people drill, baby, drill, using more gasoline makes us more tied to the oil industry versus being able to use alternatives that could be less expensive.
Running against a man named Biden. You probably saw that. And he was losing very badly in the polls. And then he had a rather bad debate. I would say it was a bad debate. I would say it was one of the worst debates in history. And his poll numbers crashed. And instead of saying, let's keep going, and maybe something happens the other way, they said, oh, we're going to replace him. Let's just replace him. That's like you're in a fight, a prize fighter's in a fight. He's not doing what you say, let's bring in another fighter. So our whole campaign was steered toward him. And now we have to steer toward him. But ultimately, it's the same because they have bad policy. They have policies of open borders, unbelievable open borders, horrible energy policies. They want to get rid of, as you say, gasoline in cars. They want to get rid of oil. They want to get rid of
We want alternatives.
efficient heating.
Not getting
Environmentally, what they're doing is killing our country. They're absolutely destroying our country. But the inflation is the thing that's hurting the black worker, the black population, and every other population within our country. Inflation is the worst it's been, I think, in over 100 years. And they'll fact check it. They'll say it's only 58. Whatever it may be, they don't add all the numbers. They don't add the really bad numbers, and you can check that too. But inflation, Harris, is absolutely destroying this country and the people in our country. Yes,
Mr. President, can I ask you another question
Yes,
that is also impacting Black Americans?
And that's very clear now. Good.
I'm sorry?
It's very clear. I hear you.
Okay. So Sonia Massey, someone from Illinois, an unarmed Black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity, in your opinion?
Immunity?
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I saw something, and it didn't look good to
Hold
me.
on. Nope.
Are you talking with the water, right?
Yeah, well,
Absolutely not. If you are a presidential candidate, your team should have made you immediately aware of that, and you should have made a statement. Biden immediately made a statement, and Kamala, you know who I'm talking about. She made a separate statement on her own Twitter. The fact that you're making all these statements about police immunity and y'all don't even take the time to make sure you are abreast on this, and you knew you were coming to talk to Black people, gone somewhere. Your little Fox, the woman on here from Fox News that's sitting up here that's supposed to be his homegirl and stuff, she should have at least let him know, like, hey, this is cutting edge. This is what's going on, that we are concerned. You know, I'm not even gonna say we, because she ain't a part of this. I don't claim her no more.
Police unions are not backing this person either.
Okay.
But again,
are they going to be charging the officer? I guess they're charging the officer.
So why should he receive immunity?
Well, he might not. I mean, it depends. It depends on what happens. I'm talking about people that are much different cases than that. We need people to protect ourselves.
Not what he said.
By the way, in Chicago, as an example, a few weeks ago, July 4th weekend, they had 117 shootings and 17 deaths. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We need to have our police officers have the respect and dignity back. In this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
So can you get a little more specific back to the
Wait.
question?
So which one is it? He said, in this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. But before you were like, I'm not familiar with it. Which one is it, liar? Which one is it? But furthermore, he wants all cops to have immunity. So there wouldn't be exceptions for this. And that's because it's not his children who are getting, gunned down in the streets.
Who would make those
Well, right now, for the most part, people are protected by their unions, by their police unions, or by their police departments. But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted because the person did a good job maybe with crime, or made a mistake, an innocent mistake. There's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. But if somebody made an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine
you
an
go
innocent
after
mistake?
somebody and it's a very close call and it's very dangerous. And they have the policeman's life and woman is a very difficult thing, because sometimes you have less than a second to make a life and death decision. And sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake.
But here's the problem. Him giving blanket immunity to all of them allows the evil decisions to prevail. It allows them to get rid of the evil decisions. See, he wouldn't have even needed to make the statements that he's made about everyone should receive immunity if he's only talking about the accidents. The accidents are already protected. We got that. He specifically stated what he wants to do is expand on what we presently have with respect to police immunity. So what he's saying is not just accidents should be covered. Everything should be covered.
So I want to follow up really quickly. I find it interesting because you do talk about reining in prosecutors, especially when it comes to prosecutors that are prosecuting you. Why doesn't that skepticism apply to law enforcement?
Well, I've been prosecuted because I'm a political opponent of two people that have weaponized our justice system. I've been prosecuted. I just won the big case in Florida. Everyone said that was the biggest case. That was the most difficult case.
Lying.
And I just won it. Now, Biden has a similar case, except much worse. I was protected under the Presidential Records Act. Biden wasn't, because he wasn't president at the time. And he had 50 years worth of documents. And they ruled that he was incompetent, and therefore he shouldn't stand trial. And I said, isn't that something? He's incompetent and he can't stand trial.
This
and
never
yet,
happened, guys.
he can be president. Isn't that nice?
Mr. President,
But they released him on the
Never.
basis that he was incompetent. They said he had no memory, and he was a nice old guy, but he had no memory, and so, therefore we're not going to prosecute him. I won the case, and it got very little publicity. I didn't notice ABC doing any publicity on it, George.
We covered you extensively, sir. I'd love to move over on to
I
different
didn't notice
topics
you
now.
do any publicity on it.
I think he's referring to the case regarding presidential immunity, and none of the things he just described happened with regards to Biden.
At all. I won the case, the biggest case. This is an attack on a political opponent. I have another one where I
Sir, if
have
you
a
don't mind, I'd
hostile
love to.
judge.
We have you for a limited time, sir. I'd love to move on to different
No,
topics.
excuse
if
you.
we
You're the
can.
one that held me up at 35 minutes, just so you understand.
If we can move on now to the state of the
She
race,
does
sir,
not
I want to
work
get back to the
here. She's not
campaign.
fact check.
Senator J.D. Vance is your running mate. He's had a lot of controversy lately, and I want to read you a few things that he has said in the past. He said the Democrats running the country are a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. He's not talking here about how great it is to be a parent. He's attacking what he says are the choices people are making to not have children.
He didn't win
Did
nothing
you know
in
that
Georgia.
he had these views
No.
about people who do not have children before you picked him to be your running mate? And do you agree with him?
No, I know this. He is very family oriented, and he thinks family is a great thing. That doesn't mean he thinks that if you don't have a family, it's not. I know people with families. I know people with great families. I know people with very troubled families. And I also know people with no families. They didn't meet the right person. Things happen. You go through life, you don't meet the right person.
But he's not just talking
Excuse
about
me.
families here.
And
He also
some of
says that
those
people that don't have children should get less votes than
That's
those
all
that
right.
do.
He sure
I'm just speaking
did.
for myself.
Is that your
And I
campaign
think I'm
position?
speaking for him too. He strongly believes in family. But I know people with great families. I know people with not great families that don't have a family.
He
And the
knows.
people without the family are far better. They're superior in many cases, okay? He's not saying they're not. What he's saying is that he thinks the family experience is a very important thing. It's a very good thing. But that doesn't mean that if you grow up and you grow older and you don't meet somebody that would be wonderful to meet and would have been good, that that's a bad thing. He's not saying that.
That's exactly
my
what he's
interpretation.
saying.
You'll have to ask him, actually. But my interpretation is he's strongly family-oriented. But that doesn't mean if you don't have a family, there's something wrong with it.
Just one last point and then we'll move on. Just one of the bedrock principles of American life is one person, one vote. Senator J.D. Vance has suggested that someone who has children should have more votes than a person who does not have children. I just want to be clear here. Is that the position of your campaign?
Well, no, but it's not something I have ever heard before. I can tell you this. Right now, you have illegal aliens coming into our country, many from prisons and many from mental institutions, and they want to give them votes. I don't think they should have votes. They came into our country illegally,
Nobody
and they're
Only
taking the
American
vote away
citizens
from
are
all
allowed
of the
to vote,
people in
sir.
this room that have been.
You have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. You can't even be a primary or a permanent resident. Like, you got to be a boy.
Here a long time that have worked hard, that in many cases, and you'll see this happening, if I'm not elected, you're going to see it happening. If I am, you're not going to have any problem. But you're going to see it happening a long time. You're going to see the people in this room and people outside of this room are going to be losing their jobs to people that have come into this country illegally.
Mr. President, can we stay with just kind of the state of the race right now? Because I felt like that vice president question, candidate question was right in there with that. So let's talk about J.D. Vance for a little bit. He's had some stumbles out of the gate. I don't know if you're hearing what we hear as reporters, but it's been a tough couple of weeks for him. Why did you choose J.D. Vance?
For real.
Why did you choose him? And I'm having a hard time hearing too.
I
I know
chose him
everybody out
because-
there can, but it's
I'll
hard
tell
to
you
hear.
why. I chose him because he's a very strong believer in work and the working man and woman, and especially the working man and woman who have been treated very unfairly, because you have many of them in this room. But you have many of those people, they were treated very unfairly. They worked very hard and they were treated unfairly. He wrote the book that became a bestseller. The movie became a smash hit. He's a very smart guy without the benefit of having a family that has contacts, like a father that was well-connected. He
Like
got
you.
into Yale Law School. He graduated in 2 years from Ohio State, summa cum laude. I mean, you take a look at, his career has been an amazing career. He started off at a level with a difficult family situation, very difficult.
His mama liked to do drugs. That's what he's getting at. His mama did drugs a lot and went to rehab. Why did she go to rehab? She could afford rehab because they had sufficient money for that. They were able to figure that one out. But I also believe, in part, J.D. Vance was probably selected because previously he did speak out against Trump. And I believe they were trying to bring in those Republicans who felt like they were never Trumpers, who felt like they could never vote for Trump, by giving him a young VP, right? Because he can go any day now. Okay. If he were to win the presidency, he would officially leave office as the oldest living president in the history of presidents. He's that old. And by having a young, never Trumper, then it brings in those people who say, oof, I don't want Trump, but I do want to support Republican values. And I want us to be able to get in conservative Supreme Court justices, which is the ultimate goal. Because as I've discussed previously, the Supreme Court is over Congress. You can make a law, but if the Supreme Court decides they don't want the law, it's struck. If they decide, no matter how asinine, how unfair that law is, that they want to keep it, it's fine. If they want to overturn, as we saw with Roe v. Wade, despite it being in effect for 70 years or whatever it was, they can do it. So I think J.D. Vance is for those Republicans who just want to help the party continue to push the conservative agenda and do so via the Supreme Court and their judicial picks.
With the mother and the father and everything else. He ends up going to Yale Law School and was one of the top students, became the head of the Law Journal. I mean, that's an amazing thing. He's a 4-year, he was in the military with great distinction for 4 years, got out, went into business, became successful.
Oh, this is important. Miss Brown Sugar, she corrected me, and she's right. His mom actually stole drugs from her job. Addiction isn't the problem. That girl was a thief, okay? But that's part of that whole, with the opioid thing. Everyone's a victim, but when it was crack, we were all perpetrators, despite everyone being addicted for the same reason, which is that the government allowed our streets and our communities to be flooded because it was profitable.
Business, very successful in business, actually. Did public offerings and other things. And I have to believe in that. I mean, he's somebody that was born in a rough situation. Most of the people know that situation because it was very well documented in his book.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of respect for somebody that can get into Yale.
My name is not girl. You're
and
right.
become one of the best students in Yale. That meets a young
Murphy,
woman at Yale who is
country.
also outstanding, and they get married. They have a beautiful family. But he had he's made himself an amazing life. He then goes to Ohio, lives in Ohio, and
money man.
He had my endorsement. That helped. But he wins the Senate. He becomes a United States Senator. So he's a United States Senator. And so Harris, like I respect.
Mind you, J.D. Vance was the guy in Ohio who forced, basically his policies forced a 10-year-old young lady who was R-worded to give birth. He supported forcing that young lady to have to give birth at 10 years old. Mind you, doctors were like, this isn't even good for her body to have to bring a baby to full term at 10 years old. There are many 10-year-olds who don't even have a cycle because they're so young.
I respect you for your success. I respect people for their success.
The reason I asked the question is because the last time you and I sat and talked was the day that you were shot. We've been together for much of that day. You left.
Fact check.
Butler, Pennsylvania.
He was not shot. Fact check is that he was hit by ricochet. He was hit by shrapnel. It was a piece of glass that came from, there was a monitor in front of where he was speaking. The bullet or what have you hit the monitor shattered and hit his ear. Fact check.
And we didn't know what was.
We're almost done, guys.
Yeah.
And 2 days after that.
I cannot understand your microphone.
I know,
so
it is really hard for me
I mean,
to
it's just,
understand.
I can understand you perfectly.
Because she's closer.
I can understand you.
Happy to hear that.
But
sir.
I can't
Really happy to hear
understand,
that.
Harris,
I have a few more questions.
because of the distance, and the mics are really in lousy shape, but I cannot understand
Are you asking a question?
what you're saying.
So what I wanted to say was the last time we spoke, you said some words that were prophetic because I asked you who you wanted to choose for vice president.
Yeah.
And you said normally it really wouldn't matter what they would, you choose somebody that you think has a future, that sort of thing. But you said these words 3.5 hours before an attempted assassination on your life. You told me that bad things happen, Harris, and that's why this decision is important this time. Bad things happen. You said it twice.
What the heck does
When
that
you
mean?
look at J.D. Vance, is he ready on day one?
Does he what?
Ready on day one, if he has to be.
I've always had great respect for him. And for the other
No, you
candidates
haven't.
too. But I will say this, and I think this is well documented. Historically, the vice president, in terms of the election, does not have any impact. I mean, virtually no impact. You have 2 or 3 days where there's a lot of commotion as to who, like you're having it on the Democrat side, who it's going to be. And then that dies down, and it's all about the presidential pick. Virtually never has it mattered. Maybe Lyndon Johnson mattered for different reasons than what we're talking about, not for vote reasons, but for political reasons, other political reasons. But historically, the choice of a vice president makes no difference. You're voting for the president, and you can have a vice president who's outstanding in every way, and I think JD is. I think that all of them would have been, but you're not voting that way. You're voting for the president. You're voting for me. If you like me, I'm going to win. If you don't like me, I'm not going to win.
I'm going to get my J.D. Vance question in.
JD Vance?
I'm going to get my J.D. Vance
Sure.
question in. To
Good
your point
girl.
And to Rachel's point, he, has a lot of opinions about childless women like myself or divorced people like yourself. Do you think?
Kidding.
Well, I mean, my
But
point
at
is
least
here.
it was said in a friendly manner.
My point is, do you think the Republican Party is getting a little bit too judgy about people's lives when you think about abortion or when you think about what J.D. Vance is saying?
I don't think, look, I think that the Democrat Party is really the one that has the problem. I think they're radical on abortion because they're allowing abortion in the 9th month. They're allowing the
But I
death.
think it's
They're
about
allowing
freedom,
the
right?
death of a baby after the baby is born, based on
Abortion in the
Governor
9th
of
month?
Virginia.
Yeah, no.
based on the
it's
governor of
called giving
Virginia.
birth.
They're allowing the
Every
death
state
of
in
the
the country
baby
is illegal.
after it's born. They're
It's a crime.
allowing abortions in the 8th and 9th month.
Well, Democrats have
I
denied.
think they're right. And I think the Republican Party is actually much less. I think I've made them much less radical, perhaps. But the Republican Party, what we're doing is bringing it back to the states where everybody wanted it. Democrats, Republicans, liberals,
That's
conservatives,
not
everybody
true.
wanted
They've
abortion
taken away a
brought
lot
back.
of
They
the
didn't want
sensibilities
Roe v.
of
Wade in the
that.
federal government. They wanted it. Everybody
But the
wanted
majority
it
of
back.
Americans opposed
Excuse
Roe
me.
v. Wade being
They
overturned.
don't know
polls have showed
about
that,
this.
sir.
Right now, they're voting. It brought it back to the states. Now, I happen to believe in the 3 exceptions. Ronald Reagan believed with rape, incest, life of the mother. I do. I think most people do. I think most Republicans do also.
Vance does
But if
not.
you take a look, right now they're doing, it's an amazing thing. Out of the federal government, it's in
never.
states, and people are voting. And I will say, Ohio
You don't-
is, let's call it a more liberal version, has been approved. Kansas, the same thing, a little bit surprising.
You lying. Ohio was the one that I said just made a 10-year-old who was R-worded give birth.
To a lot of people. But the people are now voting. And it's taking this issue that's been going on for 52 years and has torn our country apart, and it's giving it to the people to vote on. And they're voting. And many states have already voted. Others are in the process of voting. And it's bringing it back to the people and a vote of the people. And it's not at all radical. And again, you have to follow your heart. I happen to believe in the 3 exceptions. Most people believe in the 3 exceptions. Most Republicans believe in the exceptions.
He's got to say
But
that.
they don't want to see an abortion in the 9th month or the 8th month. Almost everybody agrees to that. And they certainly don't want to see, in the case of the governor of Virginia, the former governor, I might add, who said, we set the baby aside and then we decide what to do. Meaning, what do? We execute the baby.
Can I?
That's a radical, horrible position. And some people want that. I don't want it. Most people
Nobody
don't.
wants
Thank you.
that.
Can I just pivot really quickly to another question about you brought up health, Harris? You're an active man. We see you golfing all the time. But if you win, you'll still be
Hit that like,
president
guys.
at 82,
No.
which is older than Biden is right now.
Subscribe if you haven't.
But not
Would you-
mentally. Look, mentally.
Miss Walker, you
Listen,
got
here's the question.
He shot. But most people,
Would you consider?
most people, I know many people in their
Yeah.
80s and their 90s that are in great shape. Some of our greatest leaders. You look at throughout the world history, the greatest leaders, some of the greatest leaders in the world were in their 80s.
But here's the question: would you consider stepping down if you felt that your health was declining, or would you?
Oh, absolutely.
And who would?
I
Make,
think I'd know.
How would you make that decision?
I think I'd know. Look, if I came onto a stage like this and I got treated so rudely as this woman treated
Oh my
me,
goodness.
and I'm fine with it because she was very rude, sir. Very rude. That wasn't a question. She
Sir,
didn't
you
ask
can
me a
answer the
question.
question.
She
No,
gave a
she
statement.
wasn't.
That wasn't a question.
I repeated your
Answer the
statement, sir,
question.
actually.
You said you would. You would.
Oh,
make that
absolutely.
decision
If I
to step
thought that
down.
I was failing in some way, I want people to be sharp. I'll go a step further. I want anybody running for president to take an aptitude test, to take a cognitive test. I think it's a great idea. And I took 2 of them and I aced them.
But can
got
I just-
them. I took 2 of them. But let me ask you,
Yeah.
I would like to have people running for president. And I don't mean because they're 75 or 85. I think anybody running, I'd like to do it. People say it's not constitutional. I would like to have something passed where you can do it. I think we should know. I mean, I've watched what's happened in the last couple of years under this gentleman, and our country is a mess. We have inflation. We have the millions of people falling in. We have Afghanistan, which was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. What he has done to our country, and her too, what they've done to our country, she has been a horrible vice president. She's considered the worst vice president in the history of our
Mr.
country.
Don't
President,
answer the
Bush
question, but would you consider
sent us
taking
to
a cognitive test?
Afghanistan.
Mr.
I
President,
would love to
And
do
make
it.
it public?
Well, I've already taken 2 of them, but I'll do it again.
Mr.
I
President,
suggested,
how do you
Make it public.
intend
I
to-
suggested, Harris, that let's take one. I said, Joe and I will go and take a cognitive test. Now, I'd do it with her too. I would do it with her also. You know what? She failed her law exam. She didn't pass her law exam, so maybe she won't pass the
hell no.
cognitive test.
Mr.
Are you
President,
saying she wouldn't pass? Just to be clear,
I'm just giving you the facts.
to be clear, you don't think
I'm
Harris
just
how do you
giving you
intend,
the
and,
facts. She
and
didn't
look,
pass her bar exam, and she didn't think she would pass it, and she didn't think she was going to ever pass it. And I don't know what happened. Maybe she passed it. I
She
guess
did pass it.
There's
She
a man
did-
over
she
here.
did
I
in
think
fact
he
pass
must
it.
work. for
Mr.
her.
President, I would love to ask you about January 6th. You called yourself a candidate
No.
of law and order.
He's not.
When Time Magazine asked you if you would consider pardoning all the rioters, you said, yes, absolutely.
Sure.
You called them patriots. 140 police officers were assaulted that day. Their injuries included broken bones. At least one officer lost an eye. One had 2 cracked ribs, 2 smashed spinal discs. Another had a stroke. Were the people who assaulted those 140 officers, including those I just mentioned, patriots who deserve pardons?
Well, let me bring it back to modern day. Like about 5 days ago, we had an attack on the Capitol, a horrible attack on the Capitol. You saw the people that were protesting and spraying these incredible monuments, bells, lions, all these magnificent limestone and granite with red paint, red spray paint that will never actually come off, especially on the limestone. It will never, I'm a builder, I know about this stuff. It'll never, you'll see it in 100 years from now. They viciously attacked our government. They fought with police. They fought with them much more openly than I saw on January 6th. What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to the people in Portland that destroyed
But sir, my
that
question
city?
is on
What's
those.
going to happen to
My
the
question
people
is
that
on
tried
those
to burn
rioters
it?
who assaulted
Excuse me,
officers.
you have to
Would
answer.
you pardon
What's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You
If
would
they're
pardon those-
innocent, if they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
And by the way, the Supreme Court just well, they were convicted by a very tough system. How come the people that tried to burn down Minneapolis, how come the people that took over a large percentage of Seattle, how come nothing happened to them? How come the
But
people
sir, we're
that,
talking about
how
people
come
that
the
were
people-
seen
law.
beating
We're
officers
talking
with
about federal
flagpoles,
buildings.
dragging them down the stairs. They're on
They
video. Have you seen that
really?
video,
Oh,
sir?
really? Well, they
you would
shot-
pardon those. You would pardon those rioters?
They shot a young lady in the face who was protesting. They shot her in the face. You know, nobody died that day. You do know that. But people died in Seattle. Nobody died, but people died in
140
Minneapolis.
officers
You know,
were
people died in
assaulted that
Minneapolis.
day.
And nothing happens, and nobody ever talks, and nothing happens to those people. But you went after the J6 people with a vengeance. And I'll tell you what about the cops that were, and I'm all for the police, as you know, but what about the police that are ushering everybody into the Capitol? Go in. What about that? Look,
No one was
nothing
ushering.
is perfect in life. But you have people from Minneapolis, you have people just from 5 days ago in Washington, D.C., they were having fistfights and fighting with the police. They were spraying and destroying, they were desecrating our monuments in Washington, D.C. 5 days ago, and nothing happened to them. And you can't have two systems of justice. That's why they went after me as a political opponent, because they felt they couldn't win without doing that. And we're going to win our cases, and we're going to be vindicated. But I have to.
You guys, it's very important in telling to recognize he keeps talking about going after someone as a political opponent. Here's the thing. The Supreme Court's ruling about presidents having complete immunity, the issue with that is that literally as a president, they could go after a political opponent and get away with it. As long as they do it by saying, I'm in my presidential capacity, I made a judgment that this was in the best interest of the American people. So it is very telling that he keeps discussing this, because this is actually the media's prime example of why the Supreme Court's ruling was so bad. And I anticipate that this is how, if he's in office, how he would intend to use that Supreme Court ruling is literally to be able to go after political opponents and get away with it.
To spend a lot of time on that and money. That's what they want. After the election, they won't care. Although in my case, I think they probably will, because the hatred is pretty deep. But I'll tell you, they went after me as a political opponent. That's never happened in our country before. And it sets a terrible, terrible precedent.
What do you do on day one if you win? What's your first thing?
What do? I close the border. And I do two things, because I can do a lot of
He
things
pardons
simultaneously.
himself.
I close the border. We don't want people coming. We want people to come in, Harris, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. They have to come in legally. We want
Legal,
people. I want
yeah.
people to come into our country, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. So when you say, what do? That, and I drill, baby, drill. I bring energy way down. I bring interest rates down. I bring inflation way down, so people can buy bacon again, so people can buy a ham sandwich again, so that people can go to a restaurant and afford it. Because right now, people can't buy food. Your grocery bills are up 40, 50, 60%, right? She's agreeing to me. Oh, she's agreeing. Thank you. I like you very much.
Mr. President, I think we are.
But it's true. Your
Drilling
grocery
doesn't
bills are
decrease
up.
the price.
And then they're mandating that you buy an all-electric car. You know, Elon Musk endorsed me, and he's a friend of mine. He's a good guy. He's a smart guy. But I'm against everybody
Right.
having an electric car. Okay, I'm very much against that. You have to be able to, if you want a hybrid or if you want a gasoline-propelled car. But you know, we have more liquid gold, gasoline, oil under our feet than any other country. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than any other country. I want to use it. I want to use what we have. I want to bring down prices, bring down costs, and I also have to stop the invasion. And remember, they're taking your jobs. These people coming in are taking your jobs.
Project
Mr. Pre-
2025.
I think we have to leave it there by the
Okay.
Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much, Mr. Trump, for coming today and joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
They've been telling us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, very much. Great
Thank you,
honor.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
NABJ.
I ain't never seen nobody lie that much since his last presidency. If anyone wants to come up and speak on the panel, if there's anyone that wants to share anything, you don't have to show your face. You can turn off your camera to do so. But wow. H. Esquire says he probably would use the DOJ to bring charges against Fonnie Williams and Letitia James. He absolutely would. He believes the DOJ should be his private attorneys. The other thing about him being reelected is if reelected, he would be able to use those resources to get the cases, or at least he feels, get the cases against him dismissed. Now, The thing of it is, though, the cases that are pending against him are each state court cases, New York State, Georgia State. And those are important because it means he can't pardon himself. The pardon can only be used for federal offenses. However, he could use the Supreme Court potentially and other things to entangle it all, but also he'd be able to continue fundraising and using those funds to fight his private legal issues. And that's the thing. He don't like paying for nothing. He don't like paying for anything. Y'all, yeah, that was it. This was so much. This was bad. But this is why like other countries laugh at us and they're like, you guys cannot be serious. Latrell said, oh, hit that like button, guys. If you hadn't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe. Y'all, we are now at 24,000 subscribers now. It's super exciting. I am, what was it? Here we go. Yeah, we're at 24,000. So in no time, we will be at 23. Hit that subscribe button. Please share this with your friends. Yep, 24,000. It's super exciting. Gisela said, Heather said, I saw it live. They let him get away with too many lies, especially about the live A word, which is literally murder. And the fact that he doesn't know, like, this guy is not taking the presidency seriously. He really just wants the power and he wants to be able, the ability to be able to get away with the offenses that he knows he's committed and have no repercussions. I also firmly believe that he also owes some things to Russia, that Russia has what's called compromat, which means dirt. They've got dirt on him. And the agreement is that he has to tout Russia and he has to support them in ways. Otherwise, because that is, we still remember, not only did Russia interfere, it was confirmed that they in fact interfered in our election. But did you guys know that once Fani Willis pressed the charges against Trump and was proceeding with the trial with him, he wasn't able to get it postponed and all those things, Russia interfered and hacked the Fulton County justice system, the criminal court system, the civil court system. You could not e-file. As an attorney, let me tell you, we got an attorney in the chat too. If he's still there, feel free to speak to this. I can't tell you how dangerous that is. For example, if you were the victim of abuse and you needed to file an emergency restraining order, we do that as attorneys by e-filing, which means any time of the day or night we could do that. You couldn't do that. You could not do that for weeks. They needed paper filing and all of these things. The phone systems were down. The electronic, weeks and weeks and weeks. Now it's California, but it was without question. It was confirmed that Russia hacked the Fulton County system. And it just happened to be at the same time that Fani Willis was pursuing the issues against Trump, and where they were like bringing her in to have the inquiry as to whether or not the prosecution of Trump was permissible. But that just goes to show how vindictive he is and how dangerous it is to allow this kind of person who will take his personal issues against that woman and her administration out against an entire community. No one was spared on that. So if you had a criminal case, you could not have it proceeded. It was the Fulton County justice system was crippled. So if you ever meet an attorney who does criminal law in that county, you want to ask him, hey, what was it like when that system got hacked? How did you guys operate? It was crippling. Thank you guys for joining another episode of Girl, Is That Legal? Share this with your friends. Definitely subscribe. And I really appreciate the support. Thank you guys again. Oh, and tonight, come on back. 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, I will be on Court of Public Opinion with Al Reynolds, as well as another guest attorney. And we're going to be breaking down some of the trending legal topics going on tonight. Again, right here on this channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button when you're on your way out. Thanks.